As I told you in the last time, the inflation surge is global phenomenon and it is one of the most important events in the last 2 years or maybe three. So, and there is some policy responses to this surge in inflation, and these kinds of monetary policy response is another big kinds of main player in changing the shape of the world economy. So we are now doing some details of these kinds of two different channels of effect of the inflation in the recent years, maybe 2022, and you can also expect some predictions or the forecast for 2023 about this kinds of effect of the inflation. So one important thing we can definitely understand is that this inflation is not only caused by the supply side, but also in the demand side as well. So the both sides of the market economy did make a huge impact on the surge of the inflation, and that's the only way we can understand why this huge amount of inflation has been happening. As I told you in the last time, this level of inflation was the historical level. We did not see this level of inflation in the past 40 or 50 years. And so this is a really important point to understand why this inflation has been happening and what kinds of important factors that made this kinds of event happen. And most of economists agreed upon that there are some demand factors and there is some supply factors. And one demand factor is that some fiscal support or fiscal stimulus made by some advanced countries such as the United States, the Japan, and South Korea, or some European continent, including the ECB or the Eurozone countries, they made a huge amount of fiscal stimulus that was totally unexpected. So this unexpected increase in government spending was playing the sudden increase in the total expenditure in the GDP. And the fact is that the consumption was not decreased huge. It was some structural changes from the service sector to the more durable goods sector. So there is some structural changes in the private consumption, and there is some short-term shrinking in investment because of the mobility restrictions by the government due to the pandemic. So all of this negative effect on the consumption and the investment was really short-term event that would be ended pretty soon. But the government thought that, okay, so we are in the crisis because our labor cannot move around, so our labor cannot go to their workplace, so we need to spend our money. We need to spend a lot of money to compensate for these kinds of decrease in consumption and the investment. So they made huge government spending, but that was a kind of mistake evaluated by so many economists in terms of inflation control. So they failed to control the investment because they spent too much money, and that's kind of demand side of shock. So in more jargon or more expert words, this demand side increase is called the demand pulling on inflation pressure. So there is some pressure from demand side, demand pull. Some government spending was pulling inflation pressure into the higher level. But also, the economists pointing out that there is some supply side of shortage because supply went down. There is some increasing pressure of the inflation. So they call this is cost push inflation pressure. Some production costs had been increased because of some unexpected event such as the Russian invasion on the Ukraine. And these kinds of shortage in supply pushed up some intermediate good prices or some production level prices. So the production cost of most of the goods and services were increased. In addition to this cost push inflation pressure, there is a huge increase in demand for more durable goods, including semiconductors or the other intermediate goods. So there is some bottleneck effect on the global value chain cycle. So supply goes down, but demand goes up, so price goes up. So those two sides of market economy made the same direction of the effect on the inflation pressure. So this is a short-term situation. And this is observed situation. Because we know pandemic will be ended up pretty soon, maybe in 2 years, maybe in 3 years. We don't know when the pandemic is officially ended, but we know there is, the time is coming. And we also know that Russia will stop the war pretty soon. We don't know when, but maybe 2 years, maybe 5 years. It cannot go to 100 years of war, right? So Russian war will be ended. So our global value chain will go to the normal cycle pretty soon, maybe 2 years, maybe 3 years. We don't know, but we can firmly say that those two factors on the inflation will be ended in short term, maybe in 5 years, for sure. So our long-term expectation on the inflation remain pretty cool, pretty stable. And the main factor that can possibly affect in this long-term inflation is the monetary policy. If government raises interest rate, then what do you expect from that policy changes? Okay, so our central bank raised up interest rate by 50 base points, so it's getting harder to borrow some money, pretty sure, in the short term. So I can expect there will be less people who borrow the same amount of money, so there will be less investment, so our GDP will goes down. So since our total expenditure will goes down, the price level will also goes down. So that's a normal procedure of our logical thinking in response to the contractionary monetary policy who raised up the interest rate. So if monetary policy goes up, then the borrowing cost or interest rate will goes up. So there is less consumption, less investment. So our GDP goes down. So our price level will goes down. Since our real economic activity will be negatively affected by this contractionary monetary policy. So total price level of this country will go down too. That's our reasonable expectation. So the Bank of Korea in South Korea or the other central bank make a survey for the normal people, like you guys, normal consumers or normal fund manager, and they should answer the question like, okay, so I expect the inflation of this country will go down after 6 months or will go up after 1 year. So you can just choose answers from the choices. And the survey result is collected and make a normalization. Then we can see one number, which is the long-term inflation expectation that is announced by the Bank of Korea in the case of South Korea. So the result of that long-term inflation expectation from the economic agent are pretty stable, means that monetary policy is now working. They are pretty much successful in curbing inflation rate in the longer term rather than short term, because they cannot fully control short-term factors on the inflation pressure, like the Russian invasion. Korean monetary policy cannot make any changes in the Russian decision making. So they cannot control any part of supply side of inflation pressure by controlling the Korean interest rate. So they cannot fully control the short-term factors on inflation, but they can make people to expect less inflation in the future by controlling the domestic interest rate. And United States, South Korea, or the other advanced countries are pretty much good in controlling their people's expectation. So the World Bank say that inflation pressure are beginning to recede because of one bad reason, slowing economic activity, and supply chain is now going to be back to the normal, and the aggressive monetary policy intervention. So these kinds of policy effort and some going back to the normal track in supply chain, global supply chain pattern, and less total expenditure in this part because of our economy is going slow down. So combine these all factors are making people expect less inflation rate in the future. Maybe after 6 months or after one year or after 2 years, they expect, okay, so our inflation rate will go a little bit lower than now. So this is good news for us, definitely. But how about the financial side of the economy? As we already discussed in the last time, there is a significant tightening of global financial conditions or global financial markets because of the tightening monetary policy. So this contractionary monetary policy or increase in the interest rate worldwide, triggered by the Fed in the United States, and most of emerging market or the advanced countries follow their Fed decision making because they have to follow the decision making by the Fed because they don't want to see some capital already invested in their own country fly out to the United States. Capital outflow means that there is less investment in our own country, so our GDP will go down further. So there is higher probability of economic crisis in our country. So in order to defend the possibility, we have to increase interest rate as much as the Fed did, regardless of the domestic economic condition. That's a kind of dilemma for most of countries, except the United States. The only United States can determine interest rate by themselves, decided by their own economic condition. All the other countries should think about decision making by the Fed because they need to think about the potential possibility of capital outflow or inflow between the United States and their own country. So after Fed increased their interest rate a lot, there is capital outflow from the emerging market to some advanced countries, as we will see. So, for instance, China has a lot of capital outflow in 2022. So, China has been one of the most reputatious country in which the countries import a lot of capital by exporting a lot of goods and services. If you export goods and services, then you're gonna receive the bills or the receipt from the importing country. That's calculated by the money, and that means the capital inflow. So export more means that there is capital inflow because you receive some money for the price of exported goods or services. And all of you guys already know that China is one of the main exporter in the global economy. So in the last 20 years or last 2 decades or 3, China experienced a lot of capital inflow into that country. And with that, a lot of capital, what kind of things did you guys see? Every Chinese guys buy a lot of luxury goods because they have a lot of money. All of the capitals were inflowing into China. So most of Chinese guys bought a lot of houses abroad. So if you go to Vancouver, Canada, most of land road around the neighborhood of any kinds of big university, like British Columbia University, all of these land roads were the Chinese guys because they purchased 1 or 2 good houses in Canada, in Vancouver or Toronto. So the news said that in, I think maybe 5 years ago, before the pandemic, 2018 or 2019, 30% of Vancouver houses were sold to the China or Chinese people or China-related guys because they have a lot of money in their own pocket, so they heavily invested in some foreign assets. And that's kind of a normal pattern. When Japan dominated the world, maybe 40 years ago, so maybe 1980s. This is pretty old story, but it's really similar to the recent story, so I will tell you guys about this old story. Japan kinds of manufacturing good were pretty good. If you buy any kinds of electronics made by Japan, you can say that this is good one. When I was teenager, I bought one CD player. Do you guys know what the CD means? Yes. Really? Wow. Oh, you guys know that. It's pretty surprising. So there is CD player.
You know the cassettes.
Oh, you know cassette?
Yeah.
Yeah. Cassette is kinds of neutral kinds of cultural goods. So I totally understand if you guys buy LP or some tape, cassette tape. I know because that look pretty much a hip kind of hipster thing or something. But if you guys know the CD, it's pretty surprising to me. Okay, so I bought one CD player made by Sony, and I brought that one to my school. Then all of my friends were, "Oh, you have Sony, so you're pretty good." So the made in Japan means pretty good thing, right? So one of the Japanese firm named Toyota, is car maker, decided to export their cars to the United States, but there was some barrier because most of Americans really loved pickup truck. Do you guys know what the pickup truck means? Yeah, it is kind of truck that does not exist in South Korea, but it is mostly sold item in the car category in the United States. So the pickup truck is kind of cowboy culture thing in the United States, so they really love to buy the pickup truck. It's pretty big thing, but the main characteristic of Japanese car is that their cars are pretty much small, right? Their car is pretty small but pretty durable, pretty good thing. So Toyota invented a small pickup truck named Tundra. So the kind of stereotype about the pickup truck until this time was that pickup truck should be big one because America doesn't have any limitation in the land, so there is no problem when you buy the big car and put a lot of petroleum, doesn't mean any wasting. So every American bought a big pickup truck, but Toyota made this small pickup truck named Tundra. So what happened was the city guys, not only the suburb guys, but if you live in the Manhattan, you can drive the pickup truck by having the small Tundra car from the Toyota. So the export of Toyota car was really peaked in the middle of 1980. So Japan car makers dominated American car market. So there are a lot of trade surplus to Japan. Which means that there is a lot of capital inflow to any Japanese farms or household. So with this money, what Japanese guys did was buying a lot of houses and some buildings in the United States because that's their American dream. So 1/3 of New York City was owned by Japanese guys in, I think maybe 1988 or 89 or this kind of something. This is the last time of Japanese boom situation. So it is kind of normal for some country that experiencing a lot of capital inflow. They bought a lot of foreign asset, which will give you pretty much brighter return, rate of return or rate of some profit. So in that time, the Manhattan buildings or some kind of houses around New York City was the most profitable financial asset for Japanese guys, so they bought a lot of them. And the same thing for Chinese guys buying a lot of houses or buildings in Vancouver because Chinese guys really love the natural environment of Canada, so they love to buy some Canadian financial assets like Vancouver, Toronto. So same thing happened and repeated. But anyway, due to the pandemic, and pretty much tightening monetary policy by the United States, things was really changed a lot. So China is now not most exporting country in the world. They are experiencing some, slim chance of economic crisis or the financial crisis right now. So they need to defend themselves by doing some economic policies. So they are now having a lot of capital outflow from China to the other markets, like to more developed countries like the United States or the Eurozone countries. Increasing interest rate by the United States means that dollar is going to be strengthened more, appreciation of dollar. In the other word, depreciation or weakening the other currencies in the emerging market or developing economy. So buying Turkish lira or buying Chinese yen is not a good idea right now. So the better idea is that you can buy some dollar or you can buy some euro, then you can get some extra money by exchanging that to won after 6 months or a year, because we can reasonably expect that the value of dollar will be increased from now on, pretty sure, for about 100%. So many countries are experiencing some depreciation of their own currency, and this is pretty tougher condition for countries in which these countries are importing a lot of necessary goods like fuel or food or some energy. They need to import a lot of these really needed goods with expensive price level right now, more expensive one. So they have to spend a lot of money to maintain their life. Is pretty hard condition for many countries. So the kinds of last choice for them right now, because they don't have many choices, so the last choice they can choose is going to the riskier asset to compensate their kinds of financial or potential financial loss because of this depreciation. So the risk appetite or buying more riskier asset in many countries will be a more dangerous factor in our world economy, because buying risky asset means that you can expect higher rate of return, but also there is higher probability of default of all of your asset. You're gonna lose a lot of money definitely, because that financial asset you buy is really risky. So this is the first graph here, A, is our inflation expectation. So the short-term expectation is pretty high, because they know, the people in any country know that their monetary policy makers cannot make any effect in short term. So they know their inflation rate in 6 weeks or 8 weeks will not be changed a lot. But when monetary policy is continuing to raise up their interest rate continuously for the next couple of months or so, then they can reasonably expect, okay, so our inflation will go down further in maybe a year later or maybe a year and a half years later. So their expectation rate in the longer term is really lower than the short-term inflation expectation. So that's pretty good news for us. We can expect lower inflation maybe 2024 or maybe 2025. So our life will be a little bit better with this low inflation, because our labor wage will be increased by reflecting this huge inflation in the past. So our real wage will recover to the original level maybe before the pandemic. So our real wage will be increased continuously, but inflation will cut by half, so our life will be a little bit better. So we can separate the contributions of inflation by region. So second graph, the overall is rectangular means the global inflation rate, and we can separate by two parts. The red line is the advanced economy, and the yellow line the emerging market economy. So the one firm conclusion from this graph is that their inflation dynamics are not identical as time goes by. So their inflation rate in each month of the year was really different from each other. So their inflation dynamics has been pretty much different. The one good news here as well, the United States and the euro area interest rate expectation will be and would be going up during the whole 2022 year, but in this year we can expect a little bit flat or a little bit stable interest rate increase. So today a Fed announced that they will increase one more time this year interest rate, but they will decrease 2 times in the next year. So they will start to ease their monetary policy in 2024 because they know the world economy is slowing down, so there is some slim chance of economic recession in 2024 or maybe 2025. So United States have some responsibility to control the pace of slowing down of the world economy. So they announced today, it was very good news that the Fed will decrease their interest rate at least 2 times in the 2024. So their interest rate page will change it. in the next year. So we can expect, okay, so inflation will be curbed in this year. If that will happen, then we can expect, okay, so there will be some supporting policy from the monetary side of the economy. So if your country has a lot of external debt here, because your country experienced a severe pandemic situation, more people died and more people were fired, and a lot of service industry was in recession during the pandemic, then your fiscal authority had to spend more money, so they need to get more external debt from the other country, and as a result, these countries have a lot of big depreciation or the devaluation of their own currency. But if your country experienced the last severe pandemic situation, then your fiscal authority did not have to have a lot of external expectation, so their depreciation level was pretty modicum here. So all the policy makings and the economic consequences are linked to each other strictly, and we need to think these kinds of a lot of interactions with each other in a one whole picture. That's a macroeconomics, and I think that's the beauty of macroeconomics, and that's the hardest part of macroeconomic study as well. Right? Any question? No? Okay, no question is good.
I have a question.
Yeah, sure. Thank you for the
So,
question.
these days the Korean currency was pretty decreasing. I remember like for the past few months it was pretty low, but now again it started increasing in comparison to the dollar and Europe. But the thing is that Korea is exporting a lot of like nuclear power to the other developing countries, for example. So in the case of that, we were saying that they had to put like really big costs on that, right? So how did it like influence the economy when it comes to that? How did they deal with that?
Yeah. It's a very good question. So as you said that South Korea has been really good exporter in the manufacturing industry. So there are two bad news for this country. One is that the world demand for the durable good or manufacturing industry is going down because they tend to spend more money on the service industry. So since the demand going down, the South Korea's export volume will also go down a little bit. The other bad news is that South Korea has been having pretty much trade surplus in this good part, but in the service trade part, there is always deficit because the travel. The South Korean guys really love travel outside, travel abroad. And there has been the few people visiting to South Korea because, tourism resources in South Korea is definitely limited. So there is some limitation to attract more foreigners to make a travel inside of South Korea, but large volume of South Korean guys are now going out of the country to have their vacation. So this service deficit will have another really big factor in the determining the equilibrium foreign exchange rate between the Korean won and dollar maybe. So there will be a lot of uncertainty on the determination of this foreign exchange rate level. But I think this kinds of negative effect will continue a lot, or kinds of longer than our expectation, because attracting foreign tourists is not a short-term solution. The government will definitely have to put a lot of effort in, create more culture, creating more kinds of, tourism, big, brighter and more positive environment for the foreign visitors. But it is kind of a long-term plan or long-term situation. And also these Korean guys' tendency to, go out rather than travel inside the country is also a long-term trend. It is not be changed in the short term. So these service industries deficit, the trade deficit will continue for longer term. And there will be a lot of uncertainty in the business cycle and also the semiconductor super cycle or the other kinds of the global value chain system. So there is uncertainty in determining the trade surplus or deficit in the manufacturing industry. So some bad news is already fixed, but some good news we hope is a little bit uncertain. So there is some downward pressure on foreign exchange rate. That's my opinion. I'm not sure, but thank you for the question. You just make me think about that one. So pretty good question. Right. So now we can go to the advanced countries only. So we will look at the advanced countries condition first, and after that we can go to the emerging market situation. So so we can firstly look at the number. So the growth rate of advanced countries in the 2021 was 5.3%. It looked pretty good, but the main reason for this good number was the base effect. In South Korea, the 기저 효과. So the GDP growth rate in 2020 was negative. So you can just have really this big number easily because the last year's GDP was negative. So if you go back to the normal track, then this big number will be printed out. So this is kind of illusion. This cannot be interpreted as like, okay, so advanced country was really doing good. No, that's not. This advanced countries was going back to the normal track. Yes, that's right. So, and it was confirmed that the next year's growth rate in this region was go back to the normal kinds of rate of growth, 2.5%. And even the World Bank predicted that in 2023, growth rate will be just 0.5%. It is really bad number, even though we consider the flat economic condition of most of advanced countries, it is really bad number. So, which means that there is a lot of risk here, including the gas supply in the Euro area, or the United States continuing monetary policy tightening. So the housing price will go down further in the United States. And decrease in housing price in the United States means that the middle income population in the United States will decrease their consumption because there is some wealthy effect. In economics, which means that if your market value of houses, your house's market value go up, it means that this increase in your property price in the market in terms of the market value will give you the additional confidence in consumption. So if I bought my house is a kind of $1 million, but 2 years later, if the market value of my house went up to the $2 million, and even I do not sell my house, so I don't have any cash in my pocket, but that makes me feel happy, right? Okay, so the market value of my house went to the two times worse. So I can buy a beer for you because I'm happy with that news. So that's kind of the wealth effect. So if the market value of your asset go up, that will squeeze additional consumption in the household. So that's wealth effect, and this is inverse wealth effect. If your market value of the houses go down, which means that you will lose your confidence in consumption because you will have to prepare for the potential loss due to this decrease in housing prices. Even if you sell your houses, you cannot repay all of your debt volume, so you are a little bit feared about it, so you need to save more money to protect the kind of possibility. So your real consumption will be negatively affected by this decrease in housing prices. So that's the reversed or inverse the wealth effect, and that will be happen in the most of advanced countries. And inflation means like the value of your currency is going down, which means that your purchasing power will also go down. You cannot import more goods and services because your currency is devalued, except the United States. The most of Eurozone countries, or the South Korea or Japan, or the other advanced countries like Australia or New Zealand, all of these countries have experienced the devaluation or the depreciation of their own currencies. So the purchasing powers of these countries have been really negatively affected by the kinds of inflation. So the import volume will go down. So these are kinds of reasons why the World Bank really pessimistic on the growth rate of the advanced economies. So the energy supply problem will be ongoing, and there will be further monetary policy tightening, at least in this year. And the mobility restriction was released or lifted up in most of countries, so there will be more labor supply, which means that there will be more guys who really want to work. But because of slowing economy, there is less number of jobs opening in the market, so there is large amount of job market mismatch each other, so there will be higher level of unemployment rate. So government lifted up most of mobility restriction, then there is more potential labor supply, but labor demand will be less because of economic slowing down. So job market mismatch here, which means that higher unemployment rate here. So as the unemployment rate go up, the social cost for unemployment is pretty obvious. Government should spend more money for this unemployment insurance, so there will be a little bit more fiscal deficit. Is a potential problem. And as there is more people who really want to work but they cannot work because they cannot get any job, there will be a little bit of depression in the overall society or the community. So the economic kinds of atmosphere will be a little bit more darker than now. So this is another potential risk in the most of advanced countries. I'm not sure right now, but the good example is Spain. Spain was one of the countries that experienced the very harsh times in the 2009 European debt crisis. And it took a lot of time for the country to recover from the crisis. And during the peak time, which means that during their hardest time in the recent years, the unemployment rate for young people from 15 to maybe 30 was more than 20%. It's pretty high. Just one of the 5 young guys cannot have job even they are really looking for a job. And this number was really abnormal during that time, maybe in the middle of 2010s, but now the 2020s, this number has been pretty much more making sense for most of advanced countries, sadly. For instance, South Korea is one good example. Most of my undergrad students who already took all the credits and they already submit the English score, so they are really ready for the graduation, but they do not do that. They are just still, here as the students because they are afraid of going to job market without the huge amount of preparation. So they needed 1 or more year of the preparation as a student, so they are not counted in the unemployment, but they are actually unemployed, right? Because they are ready to graduate, but they opted not to do that because they know they will not get any kinds of good position in the job market, so they already expect some job market mismatch, so they will not going to enter the job market by their own decision making, so they are not counted for the unemployment, but they're actually unemployed right now.
So, for example, if they graduate and they have some, let's say, moment that they are having no work, and even they are the students, they are worse?
Yeah, so in order to be counted as unemployment, it is really hard in South Korea. First of all, you need to prove you have been seeking for a job in the last 4 weeks. So you apply to some company, so kinds of application form. You need to submit this application form to the some government labor institution or something to prove that you have been looking for a job in the last 4 weeks, but you were not able to get any job in those periods, and you have not working for payment more than 2 hours or 3 hours in those 4 weeks, then you are counted as unemployed. But so it is very hard in South Korea to be counted as unemployed right now. So it is really easy to not to be counted as unemployed. So you are just sitting there without seeking for a job, then you are just out of the labor force. So you need to include it. You need to be included in the labor force first, and you do not have a job, then you are unemployed. But it's really hard in South Korea. So it is kind of a problem of the statistics, because the government, the South Korean government, actually really does not want to show that this country has the higher younger generation unemployment rate. So it's really hard. So they are making statistical survey very harder. So any kinds of undergrad students who are ready for the graduation, they are not going to the government to by consuming their own time to report that they are unemployed. If you have that time, then I will recommend that you're gonna study hard or you're gonna find a job during the time. So realistically, I think the unemployment rate for the younger generation should be in realistically very high right now, because I do not see many of my students get job easily. So they spend minimum 6 months and maybe 2 years to find a good job, from my experience. But government never look at that kinds of situation seriously. So most of real graduated undergraduate students are not counted to be unemployed. So that's kind of, I think, the social problem, and I think that should be fixed a little bit at least. Good question as well.
It's interesting because in Poland, for example, when we are telling our occupation, we are not calling ourselves like students. In Korea, when you were saying what's your occupation, you were saying student. But when you're in Europe, we're saying that we're unemployed because being a student doesn't count as occupation.
Yeah, so that's the reason why I say that the 20% of unemployment in Spain was viewed as abnormal in 10 years later, but now it's viewed as normal right now, because we know and all we realize that the unemployment unemployment event for the younger generation is pretty huge social problem right now. We all know that, but it is just not shown in the number. It is not shown in the statistics, so that's kind of a problem. So it kind of limitation of some statistical survey or something. So yeah, that should be fixed by some government policy easily. But I don't think that will be happen in pretty short time because of some political reason. Any of governments do not do that.
I want to ask about what can be the main cause of the unemployment as an economic perspective or related to inflation.
So you mean in South Korea or in just general?
In South Korea case.
In South Korea case, so main reason of the unemployment, right?
Yeah.
Higher unemployment right now. I think our economy has not been going to the normal trend yet. So we are still recovering from the pandemic, and there is some kinds of disorder in the structure of the economy. So before the pandemic, South Korea is pretty much confident in the manufacturing industry. But as you know, we have some ongoing social problem of every younger generation rush to Seoul to get a job, because more than 95% of good job is just concentrated on the Seoul area. So these kinds of concentration produce some additional side effect, like there is no one who really want to go to some provincial factories that was previously populated for some industries like making ships or making some the other heavy industry things. So there is job market mismatch a lot here. So let me just tell you one good example. I don't know how to spell in English, but there is one really good natural gas provider in Chungcheong area. It is Jungbu Gas or something. I don't know how to spell it, but so this is just my own expression. So this is public, and this is also kinds of, if you go to this company, then your tenure will be automatically secure until the 60 years old. So this is a pretty good job. And the payment was pretty good. I heard that from one of the guys in this company. But the location is a problem. Location is, do you guys know the Boryong? Okay, so I will. So this is map. Oops. So I have one older sister, and my sister's name is Boryong. And one funny fact is that my brother-in-law, the husband of my sister, was from Boryong. So that's from. Oh, anyway, so the Boryong is here, and we are here. We are here in Daejeon, and there is Boryong, and I think it takes 2 hours by a car from Daejeon to Boryong. And also, I think it takes maybe 2 hours and a half or maybe 2 hours from the Seoul area. So we can safely say that the Boryong is not a worst place in the South Korea, but it is a little bit isolated. And the headquarters of the Jungbuk gas supplier is located here. So these companies guys come to the Chungnam National University to find any guy who can voluntarily work for this company. So they offer very good condition like the free kinds of transportation fee or cost, and they also provide some free apartment to successfully settle down in this region. So they offer a lot of good package if they were really interested in working for this company. But they said that they couldn't find anyone in the Chungnam National University. Because most of the guys in the Chungnam National University, especially they were looking for some guys from the engineering school or our school, the school for economics of management. They are looking for some guys who can handle some numbers or some economic or business things from our college, but they couldn't find anyone. Because our guys in the Chungnam National University really want to be hired here, Samsung or Hyundai or something. Are you guys interested in these kinds of marking? So I just mark every kind of coffee shop that I like to go here. So because I'm from Seoul, so I know very well about this city. So yeah, I just mark it up every kind of good restaurant I really want to go with my wife, and there is some kinds of juice or the other playground I can go to with my kids, so I just mark up everything. But anyway, so we know that the Jungbuk gas supplier is good company, and if you are hired, then your life will be just okay. There will be no problem for working for this company, but there's job market mismatch. Then how about this situation? If the Jungbuk gas supplier hires some guys from the lower ranked university, that's one possibility, right? Or how about students in the Chungnam National University who can go to this company or some lower ranked companies that are not located in the Seoul? So that's kind of possible compromise between the supply side and the demand side of the labor market. But actually that is not happening right now. So how about you guys? Do you guys want to go to maybe Gyeongsangbuk-do or maybe some Andong for your work, where you don't have any relative or friends in that region? It's really hard, right? Because you have to move to any kind of cities that you really don't know, even if they offer a pretty good package of the salary or the other accommodation. It's very hard for students to move out of their own city that is really familiar with and go to some unfamiliar cities. So, that's kind of the problem in right now, and this job market mismatch between the potential employee and potential employer. And the professors in our college are now trying this issue by introducing more really good company in Daejeon area to students. So how about this company? You don't know about this company, but this company is really good. So at least you need to go there for your internship or something. So that's kinds of things we are doing right now as a professor. But for me, privately and personally, it's really hard to persuade my students to go to some small or medium-sized enterprises in this region because they are, feeling that they are underestimated by me. Their goal is pretty high, so they think they are deserve to go to Samsung Electronics or maybe some big company in Seoul. But if I tell them, okay, so some smaller company in Daejeon is really good, so you're pretty much fit with them, then they feeling pretty bad because that professor is just underestimating me, or I am not deserved to be considered in.
Go to Samsung. They will have question every day. This is their
Yeah. Right. One of my friends is now working for the Samsung Biologics in Songdo, and he was, he kind of looks like 5 years older than me right now because he worked from 7 a.m. to maybe 8 p.m. and after that he also has to drink a lot with kinds of his boss or something. So in the private meeting, my friends and I sit by side in some restaurant or some pub. Then the other friends just tell me that, okay, so this guy is the older brother and this guy younger brother or something. So it's really hard to survive in Seoul. I know that because my hometown is Seoul, and I know the level of competitiveness in Seoul area and how it is really hard to survive or even thrive your life in this region. And after moving to the Daejeon area 6 years ago, I have realized that the life in this city is pretty good. Cost of living is lower and the population density is really lower. That is the biggest part for my life, getting better. There is no traffic jam here. So some Daejeon people say that there is traffic jam, but in my opinion, it is not a traffic jam. It is just cars going, right? So car is moving, so it is not a traffic jam. In Seoul, car is not moving at all for maybe 30 minutes or something. That's the traffic jam, my definition. But some Sejong or Daejeon guys say that, traffic jam is too heavy. But my opinion, it's smooth. It's car is moving, so so the life in Daejeon is pretty good. But the problem is that in Daejeon area there is no good company. That's the biggest problem in the city, and it can be solved by some higher ranked guys in some government side, but I think it's really hard to get solved. Daejeon is better than most of cities like Busan or Gwangju. Those two cities are the biggest in crisis right now because my wife from the Busan area, so I know that region very well. And there is a lot of younger guys just fly out of the Busan area in order to settle down in the Seoul. So Busan is getting old really fast. Daejeon is the same level because of the benefit from the Sejong. Because in Sejong there are a lot of young guys settle down, like me, just settle down in Sejong city or some new city in Daejeon. So Daejeon is just flat. It's kind of really normal situation right now. But the Gwangju or Busan or the other big cities really far from Seoul are having really big trouble right now. Yeah, so it's really.
Government company, right?
Mm-hmm.
So, for example, they get in Korea, they can get house, like really
Yeah,
cheap house, right?
yeah.
They get stable work, they can work 60 years or something. They
Sure.
get decent money and everything. If they want to go to Seoul, they can just go to Seoul every weekend. I don't get that.
That's one bothering part, and that's the space that we can insert the definition of Gen Z or something.
Right.
Kind of cultural background can be a kind of one of the explanation. I don't know why, but if I ask any of my undergrad students, randomly pick up the students, do you want to go to Boryong for the good payment, or do you want to go to Seoul for some smaller company? Then they will definitely choose the latter one. I don't know why, but maybe there is some information asymmetry or some lack of information about their lifetime income expectation or how much money is important for the entire life or something. So I think partly this problem can be solved by a more efficient education inside the university. So maybe there is more private consultation with a professor, so we can persuade them, or we can at least explain, or at least give them some more information. So your life expectation salary, if you go to Boryong, is this amount, and your life will be like this. But if you go to Seoul, your poverty line will go down or something. So we can explain like this. Then there will be some positive effect of education. But this kind of trend is really complicated, and it's really hard to explain at one dimension. South Korea is pretty much complicated country to understand in the straightforward line, because I'm South Korean, but to me it's really, really hard still to understand why South Korean guys doing like this or doing like that. It's really hard so it's very hard. But so that's one of my main research topics in upcoming years. So I write down one research paper about this one. So if you're interested in,
Maybe they want to take the challenge for their life.
What?
Maybe they want to take a challenge for their life because in Korea there's a comfort life.
Ooh, yeah.
But
That's
still,
yeah.
it's challenging because
Yeah.
I was living in Seoul for 9 months and
Mm-hmm.
I was like surviving there. I was surviving. So when I come to Daejeon, I feel like I'm chill. I
Yeah.
don't have to worry about that.
So that's
And
pretty.
it's boring.
Yeah, that's pretty good point. So my personal opinion is that the biggest problem of the South Korea is now the Seoul is the only international city that can compete with the other foreign international leading cities. So there are a few kinds of competitions to Seoul in the world, maybe New York or maybe Tokyo, Shanghai. I can just pick up 5 or 6 cities that are kinds of comparable to Seoul. So Seoul is really, really biggest city in the world, not in South Korea. But there is no other city who can compare to Seoul in South Korea. So Daejeon has been pretty much popular for no gem city. Do you guys know this? So there's no fun in Daejeon. But I have been in one small town in the United States for 6 years, and I can say that Daejeon is really fun city. We can drink, right? We can drink and we can spend night in some Junsan-dong or the other place. We can go to club even. So Daejeon has some fun things. But if you compare Daejeon to Seoul, then Daejeon is really no fun city. But we are really unfortunate not to have any alternative city in South Korea. If we have another pretty fun city except Seoul, then our social problem will be really, really easy. But the Seoul is the only option for the young generation to have some fun or to compete with the other guys to go to the top level, not in South Korea but in the world. There is only one option: just go to Seoul and compete with the other guys. If you live in Daejeon, then you feel like you're a little bit behind the other guys. It is not, in fact, but you can feel that, okay, so I'm living in Daejeon, I'm pretty good because this city is pretty peaceful and I'm doing okay. But you feel like, okay, so my friend living in Seoul is now running like this, but I'm working here. So this kind of, and one really bad part of South Korean guys is that they are always comparing themselves to the other guys, and they make a ranking. So I'm the first place, I'm the second place or something. So if you have any friends living in Seoul in pretty good company, getting a lot of salary and competing with the other international guys, that guy is first place in your ranking system. And if you live in Daejeon, if you are chilling a little bit, if you're drinking a lot with the other friends in Daejeon, then you are a little lower rank. So that's kind of the problem in your mind when you are South Korean especially. And that's, I think, one of the big kinds of causality.
When it's challenging, I think you will have motivation to move on because, in Seoul, even the rooms are smaller and the price are higher, but in Daejeon, for one room in Seoul, you'll find 2 rooms in Daejeon, right? And it's like, it's really boring. If they would just offer Seoul or Daejeon, I would definitely choose Seoul. Even it's challenging, even it's hard, and even I live in a small room, I don't know.
Yeah,
I have
right.
a motivation to wake up and do something, to
Right.
survive and to move on.
Yeah, my wife also went to Seoul yesterday to have some fun with her friends because she said, there is no reason to go to Daejeon. We are living in Sejong, so Sejong is more boring city than Daejeon. So to have some fun, she goes to Seoul, not to Daejeon, because she knows that Seoul has the kind of the best option for her to have some fun. a lot of things to do. So yeah, it's really unfortunate for us to have only Seoul right now.
But still, you can just get KTX, go by 1 hour.
That's another problem. So that's a good point. Before building the KTX system, maybe 20 years ago, there is a little bit regional separation between Seoul and Daejeon. In order to go to Seoul, you have to take some slower train. It takes 4 hours or 5 hours. So if you just born in Daejeon, then your destination or your life will be just fixed. Live in Daejeon, unless some unexpected things happen. So Busan has their own economy, their own economic ecosystem from the beginning to the end. But after building up the KTX, you can just go to Seoul from Busan by the 2 hours. So you can actually commute to Seoul. So you just wake up in Busan and you can go to company in Seoul. There's no problem. So that's another region that we can think of, a kinds of concentration in Seoul, all of the energy, all of the population, all of the kinds of labor force going there. Okay. Right, guys. Thanks so much for ending my speaking, and I can definitely shorten my speech. So thank you guys so much, and we will continue next time. Thank you, guys.